Hey everyone, I'm Hal Eisner. I'm a journalist here in Los Angeles, California. Spent 43 years on TV, and prior to that, was in radio in Texas, Louisiana, and it's been a wonderful 58-year career. And in fact, I've written a book about that. It's called An Accidental Career, and I'm lucky because right now I get to talk about the book and talk about things in general with the great Jim Masters. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Jim Masters Show starts right now.
And the great Hal Eisner is joining us from Los Angeles, California. What a great intro. I cannot believe it, my friend. Thanks so much for doing that.
Absolutely. I like the little sketch thing. I mean, I'm going to have you teach me how to do that. I'm pretty good at stick figures, but it stops right about there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we wanted something, a little slick, a little positive. And they were telling us, the animator said, retro is really what's in. So go retro. And that's exactly what we did. And so I'm glad you like it, my friend. And
love it.
Congratulations, a fellow television broadcaster here and radio broadcaster who has celebrated an extraordinary and exemplary award-winning career. And he is talking about it in his fabulous new book, and everybody's excited about it. And one of the great things, Hal, that I love is not only the attention for the book, but how many people just love you. They love your personality, your warm style. The fact that you really care, you've cared about the stories you've reported, the people that you've met. It's a very fickle, difficult, but fantastic industry, television and radio broadcasting, so fast-paced. But you've done it for decades. I mean, we're talking 58 years in just Los Angeles, major stations like Fox 11 in LA and KCOP Channel 13 in Los Angeles, and been on Radio 2 and other stations. It's really extraordinary. And congratulations on this epic career that everybody's talking about. And I know that, the send-off was quite beautiful too. I mean, people at the station, people in the industry, the viewers missing you, and you're still sort of in that cloud nine air of the sort of beautiful, sweet exit. But it was an exit that you knew was ready, right? You've done it. You put your time in, and you did it at the time Hal was ready, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that for the sake of transparency, I've been your age several times. And at this point, if you're dyslexic, I'm 67, but I'm really 76. And I worked all the way to 75. And I just love the job. And there are lots of reasons I loved the job, but there came a point where I realized that there were things I wanted to do, like travel, and I'm taking art classes right now, and I've got 2 guitars, and I only know how to play Secret Agent Man, so I wanted to learn how to use those. And I think that you want some space at the end of a career, and so that was something that I thought was due. And when I hit that 75th birthday. And so I retired on January 2nd of 2025, which was the 43rd anniversary of my first day on TV here in Los Angeles after 15 years of radio in Texas and Louisiana. And on the 3rd of January, I got on a plane, I flew to the East Coast, and I got on a cruise ship, and I went to Belize and Cozumel. And a few days later, the fires happened here in Southern California. And I'm sitting on the boat, and I'm thinking, God, I'm trained to report on those fires. I should be in the middle of that. But obviously I couldn't be. And I found that there were people on the ship whose kids were losing their homes. And so I was there to kind of give them some comfort. And when I got back, I was so used to community service, I jumped right in to a clothing giveaway and tried to help people who had lost everything. So I think that, after all of this, I'm still very community minded, but I worked hard. And, I think I earned the time off, and it's been like a year vacation. And now I'm doing other things too. I'm looking for things I would like to do as part of a next chapter. And right now I've got about 12 or 13 chapters in this book, an accidental career. And I'm very proud of this book. I think it's a memoir. It takes me all the way back to my childhood and all the things that happened from then until now. So, Jim, I'll tell you, I'm sure you're a walking book. And if you haven't written one yet, I'm sure you're gonna.
I'm in the process. I've been asked by many. Were you asked by many to write one, or was it something that you knew you wanted to do, or a combination of both, Hal?
It was something I wanted to do. I had started this probably 5, 6, 7 years ago with just some notes. And I had a pretty bad mishap in 2021 where I was out reporting on a story on Hollywood Boulevard, right in the thick of Hollywood, California. And a driver under the influence, twice the legal limit, jumped the curb, 3:00 in the afternoon, going about 40 miles an hour, hit my cameraman, hit me, hit several tourists, went into the front window of a market, and ended up with about 6 fractured ribs and a fractured tibia plateau in my knee. And it was at that point that I thought, there are a lot of things going on in the background of this story. And so it kind of moved me into high gear to start getting more involved in the completion of the book. And I knew I wanted it to be available sometime in proximity of when I was going to retire, which was a year ago. And I think some people still remember me. And so, they may want to hear about some of those stories and some of the other stories that occurred over the years.
Which is really amazing. How did you compile them? How did you know what to share? Because when you have such a legendary and long career, storied career as you have, Hal, how did you know what to put in and, what to leave out? It must have been difficult to sort of wind it all down.
Well, I've written all my life. I've written news stories every day, except for weekends, unless I was on a weekend shift. And, when you think about that, 365 days a year, if I worked 300 of them and did a story every day, sometimes more, you're talking about tens of thousands of stories. And so you quickly learn what's important in the telling of a story. You try to find a microcosm to tell it with. You try to find a face to put on it. You look for the things that are interesting, high points, and not let them bog down in the minutia. And so I think it's very similar. A book is long form, but it's still the same idea. You want to keep somebody's interest as they're reading your words. And so I think that, there are a lot of stories I did not tell, not because I didn't want to, because it felt like this was a good book. And it didn't need to be packed with every single little story that I could tell you, of which there were many, and a lot of interesting ones that weren't included that I'd love to have told. But I think this thing would have been about the size of an encyclopedia, if we remember those from the old days, had I allowed it to continue on.
It's this wonderful history of media coverage in Los Angeles, too. You've been a part of so many riveting and moving stories as well. And this memoir of yours, really, as you mentioned, celebrating this 58-year adventure as a broadcast news reporter, telling your story of multiple award-winning life and career moments in broadcasting. First, as you say, in wonderful radio, beloved radio, where a lot of folks get their starts as well. Some of the most well-known people started out on radio. And then, of course, 43 years in television as a fixture in the Los Angeles area on the news airwaves. And the extraordinary charting of it all, too, the way you lay it out is so beautiful, beginning with your upbringing in Pittsburgh and Dallas, and then more than a decade in radio throughout Texas as well, then moving into the 1980s, where you were a television news reporter first at CNN. We were talking about the early days of CNN and the early days of that 24-hour news network created by the one and only Ted Turner. And then local stations like KTTV, Fox 11 in Los Angeles, KCOP, Channel 13 in Los Angeles, and along the way, covering so many incredible stories, consequential stories as well for decades, including the trials of O.J. Simpson, Michael Jackson, earthquakes, fires, shootings. It's just been extraordinary. And also spending time with beloved stars like Dick Van Dyke. I've got to ask you,
Yeah.
Dick Van Dyke, God bless him, 100. What was it like when you met Dick Van Dyke?
Amazing. It really was truly amazing. I think the thing that first struck me about, first of all, I watched Dick Van Dyke. I watched the Dick Van Dyke Show growing up. I saw Mary Poppins. I was somebody who grew up with Dick Van Dyke. And I went to his home in Malibu with a camera crew. And he came to the door to greet us, and he was barefoot. He wasn't in a suit. He was in, jeans or slacks, a shirt, barefoot, and welcomed us to the door. And I thought, well, how earthy is that? And as I continued into the home and he started showing me all his little knickknacks and the little things he had on his shelves and all the goodies, I felt like family all of a sudden. And I think that Dick Van Dyke has this wonderful way of making you feel comfortable. And it manifested itself in the interview in not only us singing supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but also him showing me how to do a little soft shoe. This was when he was 91, 9 years ago. And of course, he's now turned 100. And I'm so happy to see him thriving. He told me back then, I said, "You're 91. Do you think you're going to get to 100?" And he said, "I hope so." And you know what? He did. He's happy. And I'm happy he did it. He was a lovely and is a lovely man. And I don't know of anybody who doesn't really find him to be delightful.
I remember there was an interview, I think it was on CBS Sunday Morning a few years back when they had, the all-stars from television. It was Dick Van Dyke, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and Norman Lear all together, which was extraordinary. And of course, the remaining now, Mel Brooks, God bless him, and Dick Van Dyke as well.
And I interviewed Carl Reiner.
Carl Reiner, yes. Yep. From New Rochelle. Really absolutely amazing. That's just the short list of the many things that you've had an opportunity to be a part of and gracing everybody with your wit and wisdom along the way. What was it like living in Dallas as a kid when JFK was assassinated in 1963, Hal?
That was tough. I mean, I was 13 when my dad got promoted in his company and we moved to Dallas. He became a regional sales manager and started school. And here comes November the 22nd, just a couple months after we arrived. And I'm in a science class. The teacher is Mr. Hofrichter. Kind of looked like a Marine, a little bit of a flat top, nice man, but it looked like a tough fella. And when Lloyd Bell, the principal, announced on the speaker, there's been a shooting that involved the president, and he is on his way to Parkland Hospital, I could see Mr. Hofrichter in the front of the room do this. And I could tell that he was deeply affected by the words he had just heard over the PA system. And everybody just took a deep breath and paused. And there was a television set up in the auditorium of the school on the first floor. And as I was walking over there, because they told us to sit in the auditorium and we could watch the coverage, there was one fellow student who came running down the hallway in tears. She had been down at the motorcade site, and she was just devastated by being there and knowing what she had experienced. I don't know if she saw the actual gunfire, but it was traumatic for her, and it was traumatic for all of us. In fact, the Dallas Morning News did a little magazine called 4 Dark Days in Dallas, and it was 4 Dark Days in Dallas. There are other connections, though, that I think are very interesting. At my synagogue, where I went to Sunday school and Hebrew school and all of that, I go into Sunday school and I walk into the synagogue. There's a whole bunch of people gathered around a wall. And in churches and synagogues, you have walls where there are plaques memorializing, people who have passed on and given by family members. And people were looking at a plaque, and it was a plaque that was donated by the family of Jack Rubenstein. And Jack Rubenstein was Jack Ruby. And he went to our synagogue. I never knew him, never met him, but it was a little too close a connection. And Abraham Zapruder, who took the famous footage that showed the president in one frame being mortally wounded, he went to our synagogue as well. So on the 50th anniversary of the assassination, I found that the rabbi, Hillel Silverman, who had moved to Beverly Hills from Dallas at some point, was in an assisted living complex in La Jolla, California. I took a camera crew down. We did a little interview about 50 years ago. And, he reflected on all of that. And I thought one of the more interesting answers he gave me to a question, when the question was, did Ruby tell you anything about why he did what he did in shooting Lee Harvey Oswald, which was on television for all of us to see? And he said, Jack Ruby told him that he did that because he didn't want the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, to have to come back to Dallas for a trial. Now, that's what he says he was told. I've always had lots of questions about the assassination. There's all the theories about the grassy knoll and a second shooter and all those things. But, I think the bottom line is it stayed with me all my life.
I can imagine. What a great story. And even before all of that, when you take a look, growing up as a kid, what initially inspired you to even go into radio and television? Were you always a kid that was doing sort of news reports and interviews? Like I had that Panasonic cassette deck, and I had the little microphone as a kid, and I would go around interviewing the relatives, and we would do all kinds of cool things, and great shows and stories. And I always followed growing up here in the New York area with, the big stations around us. We were sort of blessed, but didn't realize that was the number one market. And usually don't start, in the number one market. You start elsewhere, and then you work your way to the LAs and the New Yorks and the Bostons and all. But I was always, interviewing people, and was always very cognizant of the stations and the call letters and the news anchors and, the hosts, and something early on, even the staff announcers, I was always admiring, those that would say, this is CBS. To me, that was like God coming out of the sky. What was it like for you growing up?
God, right?
The voice of God. Ernie Anderson on ABC, The Love Boat, all those people. For you, what was the inspiration for you growing up as a kid? Were you always aware of all this as something you wanted to be and do and follow, Hal?
Well, remember, the title of the book is An Accidental Career. And sometimes accidents happen that are not a car crash or something like that, but there's an inadvertent sort of thing that happens that causes for a detour or a course correction. When I was in high school, I was in the marching band. I played saxophone, and a local top 40 radio station, KLIF Radio, the mighty 1190, had a contest. And the contest was to send in a postcard and tell Uncle Scotty, who was the nighttime disc jockey, why you wanted to report the high school football score on Friday night. I was 16, 15, 16, along in there. And I sent in a postcard. And I don't remember exactly how I worded it, but I sent in a postcard. And I was either the only one who did from my school, or they actually pulled my name out of a box, and I won. And that's why we're having this conversation, Jim, because of a postcard, because my intent was to go to school and to go to law school and to become a lawyer. And, that happened. And giving those reports on Friday night to one of the workers at KLIF, he had a little show on an orphan's home station in Garland, Texas. And he asked me if I would come in on Sundays and just tell a few stories out of the newspaper, kind of give him a break on the hour, I guess. And so I started doing that. And then the next thing I knew, he was leaving the job at KLIF and recommended me. And then the next thing I knew, it was time to go off to college. And I still thought I wanted to be a lawyer. But the first thing I did was I went and got a job at a radio station behind the scenes and a job at a TV station behind the scenes. And that was for date money. And I just sort of got sucked into this thing. And, one thing led to another. And I started realizing I was enjoying this broadcasting career I'd never thought of before. And so I started delving into that. I switched schools. I went to the University of Houston, where they had a communications school, and started looking for real jobs. And one thing led to another.
And one thing led to another. And what did the family and the folks think when you were making that divergent turn towards broadcasting and radio and television versus law?
I think it was, one would hope. My dad was the one who put it in a sentence that I'll never forget. And the sentence is, do what you do best.
Mm.
So if you're
Perfect.
a reporter, maybe don't try to be an anchor, because if you're better at a reporter than an anchor, do what you do best. And so anytime I had the reason to compare an apple to an orange, it was always do what I can do best, sort of reflecting on what my dad told me, and mom too. She felt the same way. And I think even though that they felt that it was a very unstable sort of career to get into, and it certainly can be, they were very supportive of me, and they were behind me. And that's what you want, right?
That's what you want. That's what you need, is that support system. That is fantastic. What do you consider early on in the career that break, that moment where somebody said, this guy's good, let's accelerate him, let's give him this opportunity? Were there a couple of those, even before Los Angeles and bigger markets, were there a couple of those down the road opportunities that came your way that if that guy didn't open that door, or if that didn't happen, maybe these other things wouldn't have followed suit?
Of course. I mean, we don't do anything in a vacuum. People open doors for us and for you and for everybody else at some point or another. And sometimes we recognize somebody has opened the door for us, and sometimes we don't. One person who opened the doors for me was Larry Lamott. Larry Lamott was a news director at a station in Fort Worth, Texas, radio, KRXV. It was a bicentennial year, so we had these mobile news units that were red, white, and blue with little blue police lights on top and lettering on the side. And he ended up going to CNN, and he was the one who believed I could go from radio to TV without experience because I had the skill sets, whatever they might have been in his mind. And he managed to open doors for me to get to television. And it wasn't something I jumped at. It was something that I took a very deliberate approach to. But with regard to others, there was Steve Edwards. And Steve Edwards was the program director of a radio station in Houston, KTRH. And he was starting an all-news weekend. And I came in, I was a scrappy kid, and he thought I could do that job. The way he likes to put it, he better do that job because I don't want to do it. And he gave me the gig. And that was a CBS station. I was anchoring on the weekends. That was a big deal. And that was another door that was open. And ultimately, and we may want to talk about this, I don't know, but later around the year 2000, I decided to give back, and I started a camp here in Southern California called Camp News, which is sort of something that provides opportunities for people who want to be reporters or people who want to be anchors to experience what that's like and to get some tape material for their resume that they could show to a small market news director and perhaps show them they could look good on TV and do the job. And so, you know what? One hand feeds the other hand. And oftentimes I like to put it this way. I've helped thousands of kids through that camp. And part of it is because people help me. And I think we always have to recognize that it's important to give back. That just happens to be my belief. And I also thought, what a great way to create a whole bunch of mini me's. And that's scary. But I thought it was a great idea because I have a lot of things that I feel are important in life.
Yes.
And a lot of young people have bought into that. And so over the years, 26 years, over the last 25, 26 years, there have been a lot of young people, mostly college students, who have been in communications programs, who have come through the camp. And some of them ended up on television stations across the country. And I know of a couple right now that are main anchors and are, of course, in their 40s. So, and I'm 140. So I think that, we give back because we think that people did good things for us. I went to breakfast with my son one day in a restaurant, and I went up to pay the bill, and the lady at the cash register said, "Oh, you don't have to pay that." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you remember that man that was over in the corner? He paid for it." I said, "What do you mean he paid for it?" She said, "He comes to the restaurant every week and he finds somebody he thinks would be nice to buy breakfast for, and he buys it without them knowing it, and he leaves." And I thought, wow, that's moving. And so it happens to be that I believe that we're on this planet because we are a community of people. We got to get along with people. I love people. And I think that was one of the beauties of a job like this, because I'd come in contact with people I never knew every single day of the week, sometimes in bad and awful situations, sometimes in not so bad situations. But I think that, in our own little way, it's good to give back.
It is, and they're considered a civic champion in that way because you mentor people and you've given back, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mentioned also the time in the early days of the Cable News Network. Yes, folks, that's what CNN's full name has always been, Cable News Network, launched in the early 80s by Ted Turner and Company, and the station there in Atlanta. What was it like working in the early days of cable news? It was new. It was, trial and error. It was exciting. People were like, what's this going to be? Is this going to even work? How are they going to have 24 hours of news coverage? What was that like for you?
Well, remember, I came to CNN with only radio experience. And it was in the early days, so somebody like me could be accepted because they needed an awful lot of people to run an operation. And Larry, who had become bureau chief, Larry Lamont, of the bureau here in Los Angeles, gave me a job believing that I could do it. And for a couple of days, he went out with me on stories, and then he kind of left me alone to be involved in sort of a baptism by fire. And I would say it was challenging sometimes. It was difficult. It's not easy when you're not really, in radio, and you'll understand this. In radio, you write to the imagination, right? So if there's a fire, you might say the flames were licking out from under the stairwell. But in television, the video shows the flames licking out from under the stairwell. And so you got to find another 1,000 words that help enhance that image that you're putting in your story. And it took a little while for me to learn how to do that writing. I did, but it took me more than a minute to figure out exactly how to do all of that. So it could be difficult. And, there were a lot of challenges along the way, but I was never one to turn my head to a challenge. So I kept plugging away.
What are some things that you learned about the business and or about yourself being thrown sort of in the fire at a time when, the thing was being developed sort of on the spot, on the scene, the CNN at that time, and here you are developing yourself along the way as this network is developing. What are some things you were left with from that experience that maybe you find even of value to this day, things you learned about yourself and about the industry?
Well, I learned to be persistent. I learned to Not that I didn't have that, but I sort of had to learn how to be persistent on testosterone. And, sometimes when you've got the pressure of a deadline, and you've got to get something out there, whether it's because you have a 5 o'clock news you're supposed to hit, or whether it's an all news operation that's constantly looking for new material because it's a news monster that has to be fed 24 hours a day, you learn how to build up those news muscles. And I think that was a good part of that. That was like going to the gym every day for my brain. And I think that, it was a great experience. But, when after that experience ended, I went local, and I found that I really loved local television. And why? I'm glad you asked. The reason I like local television is because you see your viewers in the grocery store. You see them at the mall. You see them in the, 7-Eleven or wherever it is you happen to be. And they come up to you and they talk to you and you talk to them. I'll always take time if somebody, just the other day, a year after being retired, somebody came up to me in one of the big box stores and said, "How's retirement?" I didn't know who it was, but I shook his hand and I introduced myself, which I always do. And he introduced himself. We stood there for a while and had a good conversation. And because I believe that if somebody takes the time to say, "I recognize you," it's incumbent on me to take the time to say thanks. And so I think, it's like you crawl, you crawl and you walk, whatever that saying is. And I think that's the same thing in any industry that you're trying to learn what to do. You start off fundamentally slow, and as you get better and better and get more, facile at doing things, you get better at it.
You crawl before you walk.
That's it.
Exactly.
Crawl
Yeah,
before you walk. Thank you.
exactly.
Uh,
Although in this day and age, everybody wants to walk before they crawl, it seems.
well, you know what?
Everything's so quick,
Right. But I mean, it's a different time. It's a different
Yes.
time. It's a different era. And
Tell us about that. Here you are, you've done it a long time. You've seen all the changes and you've gone from, a little bit more of a long form. I remember when I was doing television news reporting for a New York station, I was their Connecticut bureau chief. And I remember there was a time I was working as a news anchor, and news director at the time was Drew Scott, who had also been with WPIX, Channel 11 in New York, and independent network news too, INN, and then locally. And I remember when they were saying, the stories covering this, that, and the other thing were maybe about 2 minutes, 2:20. And I remember when they said, "Okay, we got to cut the stories now to 1:30 or 1:20," and everybody was like, "How are we going to tell the story in just in a minute, 20 seconds, or in a minute, or what have you?" And the changes, and now you're dealing with a world of 6-second videos on TikTok and things like that. How do you feel about all of that as a storyteller, as somebody who not only wants to tell the facts, but you want to leave people with something, a feeling from what they just witnessed and watched, whether or not they were there on the scene? It adds to the humanity of what you're trying to share with them.
well, let me take you back a step. You mentioned INN, the Independent Network News. And did you know somebody named John Corcoran, who
Oh,
was
sure.
the news
Yes.
director of WPIX?
WPIX, right.
And for a time, I became the bureau chief in Los Angeles of INN's LA bureau.
That's
And
right.
worked with John Corcoran in New York and the team there and the team here.
Pat
And
Harper was the anchor at the
yeah,
time. Yeah.
well, Tim Malloy was the
Tim
one.
Malloy,
Tim Malloy,
KCOP.
yeah, but Tim
Yeah.
Malloy was in New York before he came to KC.
First, yeah, he was on Action News. Yeah.
But that was a wonderful experience too, because I was working out of a local bureau, not working in this big. It was a network, but it was a network out of a local station,
Right.
and it was a very different experience. But what we see today in the way of information presented on things like TikTok, Instagram, and whatever. It's interesting. I mean, I think people are very creative in the way they put together stories and information, And some are very, very, very interesting. Some are thought provoking, some are funny, some make you cry. But it's not the kind of storytelling that we would do in mainstream news for a television station, for instance. This is social media, it's not news media. And I think there's certain distinctions that need to be made before jumping into a discussion on that. But I feel like anytime that I had enough of a story and there were significant elements, I would simply go to the producer, as any reporter would do, and say, I've really got this really emotional sound I would like to use in the story, but the story's already running a little long. Could I maybe have a few more seconds? It becomes almost like a negotiation. And the producer might say, well, how much time do you think you need? Because I'm pretty tight on the show. And I say, well, if I get another 15 seconds, I can make it work. Oftentimes I would get that extra 15 seconds. You just have to justify what it is you need. But comparing that kind of an experience to sort of a social media experience is a little bit apples and oranges. It's not exactly the same thing. But I like the idea that, people are engaged and people are talking and people are thinking. I don't particularly like some of the things they're talking about, but I think that's, in a free society, it's free speech. And so people have the opportunity to be able to, be creative with their language as long as they're doing things that aren't particularly offensive. But I just want to add, we're protectors of the First Amendment. The First Amendment is really our Bible. And, I feel like that's very, very important to always remember that we have the ability to be free in our speech, and we're not a state-run media, which would be, I think, a terrible thing. And I think that as we've evolved, one thing has remained constant. There is a First Amendment.
Exactly right. How about, the mindset that everything is, people are getting the information just from social media posts or just from the net or whatever, and television and radio and some of the broadcast side of things is sort of shifting, or you'll even hear people say, oh, that's old, that's dinosaur, that's ancient. TV, radio, that's gone, that's no more. I mean, I, like you, I'm a lover of it all. I embrace all of it, including the changes and the alterations and everything that happens along with it. But would hate to see that part of things just disappear into the sky, that you just get it from a little thing you see on your phone, and that's the only place where you get it, and what you're reading is fact or what have you, when you don't really have information that it is. It's changed in that way, huh?
Well, I think, first of all, remember, it's not just, somebody in a living room sitting there and putting out news. We have to remember what's credible and what's not credible. Mainstream media does its homework. That's our job. That's why we went to school. We have to get two sources for every piece of information to make sure it's accurate. We live in a very litigious society, and I can pretty much guarantee you that if you make up something and it's not supported by facts, the next up is going to be a judge in a courtroom. I've never been sued in my 58 years. I've tried to do my job as effectively as possible. I know many other broadcasters in the same boat that they've never been sued. And people like to sue. People can be sue happy. So that kind of keeps us all in line, remembering that, you have something like that happen, it's going to really have an impact on your career. But I think that, the bottom line is news stations, radio and television all have digital departments now, and they're all putting out news and information. And the news and information they are likely putting out is supported by facts, because it comes into them from the reporters. The reporters prepare the story for the news, and then there's a digital department in which digital producers are preparing things to put online. And so there is still a sense of honesty there. But I think that, it's very important to remember that truth is what it's all about. And, I believe that as I see these kids at camp, I believe many of them come with fire in their belly. Many of them are, ready to go, smart, articulate. I think we're in good shape. I think from the people that I have seen come through my camp, if they're a microcosm, I think they're in good shape. I think that, and I also think there will always be purveyors of information. And I believe that there will always be platforms for those purveyors of information. And that might take the form of a radio or a TV, might be a hologram, or like I like to say, a halogram. But but I think there'll always be people and platforms as long as we're a free society, and I have no reason to believe we will not always be a free society. And there are people that are going to be doctors, there are going to be people that are going to be lawyers, and there are people that are going to be journalists.
Exactly right. Beautifully said. It's so true. And just to confirm for all the viewers that Hal is really there, Jim is really here, and we are not AI right now. He's on the West Coast, we're on the East Coast, and we are actually here for you and with you. Many, many stories, I mean, that you've had an opportunity to be in the thick of. One of the big ones in the early 90s was those Los Angeles riots where, we were all glued to network and local television and radio at the time when that was happening. And that was intense and changing by the minute. What was it like covering the LA riots back in 1992, Hal?
In a word, intense.
Yeah.
It really was. This started with the Rodney King case, in which Rodney King was involved in a police beating. And that set off the community, which was already feeling a sense of racial tension. And, it was just very, very chaotic. The video itself caused for people to get up in arms, and but the trial is what really did the damage. And when the trial happened, and he was found to have been guilty, or I'm sorry, take that back. The cops who were involved, the police officers, were acquitted. That set the city on fire, literally. And I remember the first night driving down one of the major streets with a cameraman, and somebody had thrown a burning sofa out into the middle of the street. I remember one of my colleagues, Larry Atterbury, had to duck under a concrete wall because there were bullets flying in different directions. I remember a reporter from Las Vegas who had come over to our news van. He had been dispatched to LA to cover this story. And he was shaking and he was in tears. And I put him in our news van and I tried to calm him down and tried to befriend him and try to support him because he was incredibly upset because he heard a bullet buzz by his ear. This was a time of anxiety. And, that was later coupled with other stories like the O.J. Simpson case, in which there was still a sense of concern over justice and race, and that ended up, as we all watched on television, to be a very gripping sort of story. And so we've had some of these things over the years, and the covering, I'll tell you, covering the riot, covering the chaos that occurred was scary. I mean, we had bulletproof vests, we had helmets, we had whatever we needed to protect ourselves, but even on a regular day, sometimes somebody can get in your way and cause damage, just like the guy who hit me with a car.
Exactly right. Michael Jackson's trial was another one that you had an opportunity to cover. That was quite elongated and intense as well, Hal.
I covered a lot of Michael Jackson stories over the years, and I'd run into his family in some of these stories. And I remember in Santa Maria, one of the trials in which he was accused of, child crime, sat right in front of me in the row in front of me. There's mom, dad, Janet Jackson, LaToya, and right in front of them was Michael at the table. And I would be sitting there, and I would see him walk in every day and walk out every day. And he was acquitted in that particular trial that I covered. But covering Michael Jackson became a big part of my life, because when he died, and there were other stories before that, the fire that burned his hair and a number of different things, but when he died, that was intense. And that was a very chaotic story in and of itself. And then when Dr. Conrad Murray was accused of killing him with propofol, that was also a big deal, and I covered that as well. I don't cover a lot of trials, but those two trials are both Michael Jackson related, were intense. And I think that here in Los Angeles, and I guess this is one of the main themes of my feelings, as a journalist in Los Angeles, I had a front row seat to history. I wrote the first page of history in many cases. And you know what? This book of mine isn't just a book about me. It's a history book too.
It really is. It really is. And there's a lot of inspiration in that book, Hal. It really is a labor of love for you in so many ways and respects, and can inspire others who want to be in the industry, or just, put the puzzle pieces together about some of the stories they've always wondered about. Like, you were, first on the scene for the deadly Metrolink crash in Chatsworth back in 2008 too.
Yeah. That's a funny story, but not a funny story. My photographer, Armando Hernandez, and I went to the Van Nuys Bureau at Van Nuys Airport. This is in the San Fernando Valley, for anybody who's unfamiliar. And what happened was that we were being dispatched, and I'm going to do a little battery change here just to make
sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
There was, we were about to go do a story on another part of town, and our assignment editor said, "Get out of there, get over to here." And there's been a train crash, and we got there. We were passing police cars just to get to the scene, and we saw the walking wounded come off of the train, and we were like inside the yellow tape because we got there so fast. It was frightening. And one particularly frightening moment involved a woman who was a neighbor who had gone in and helped people coming off the train who were dazed, who were injured. And I happened to ask her on camera, and I said, "Are you okay? I mean, what's going on with you?" And she said she was in shock. You could see she was in shock. And her words were that you've never seen anything like you're holding somebody and their brains start coming from their head. And it was graphic, and it was horrible, and you had to apologize to the audience, but it was really raw and really intense.
Really amazing to be, involved in something like that, and get that word out. Something else you were involved in too was getting the word out for Martin Sheehan to his kids that he and his wife were okay in the Malibu wildfires. Tell us, how did that come about?
I was covering the Woolsey fire in Malibu, and big homes were on fire. I mean, we're talking major conflagration. And Charlie Sheen, through social media, had said, "I'm worried about my dad and mom. I don't know where they are." And the assignment desk saw that, and they contacted me in the news van and said, he may be out there somewhere if you want to try to get the word to him. And there were a lot of people parked at Zuma Beach in a great big lot. And so we went in there, and I was able to find him in a car with his wife. And I tapped on the window, and I said, "Martin, I don't know if you know, but I'm on the SAG-AFTRA National Board like you." We were both on the SAG-AFTRA National Board, just had never met. And I said, "Charlie is worried about you. He put out a note on social media, and I wonder if you might like to get on camera. I've got the camera right here. I'm about to go on the air, but would you like to get on camera and let the kids know, Stefan and Charlie and the rest of the gang, that you're okay and mom's okay. And he said, I would like to do that. And so we got out in front of the camera, top of the show, and as my story talking about the flames, Martin Sheen had the chance to tell his kids they were okay. They were in the car. They got out of the house. They didn't know the house was okay, but they were okay. And that was significant. I mean, it was what we might refer to as an exclusive story, but it was significant to be able to take that opportunity and help connect a couple of family members. And that's how that went down.
That's incredible. You've also had the opportunity, as we mentioned, to chat with so many people on the good old red carpet there in LA and in Hollywood, Dick Van Dyke. And who are some of the other folks you had an opportunity to chat with and interview, mingle with over the years that maybe are some of your favorites?
Well, I can take you back to Milton Berle and Red Buttons and people way back when. I can take you back to Lawrence Welk. I can take you back to all kinds of people who have been around and had been around for a very long time. But, I think one of the more touching moments was I was at a red carpet for the Golden Globes at the Beverly Hilton. And I was standing there and George Clooney was talking to a reporter to my right. And I think he could see I was a little anxious. I'm not sure why I was anxious, but he reached over in between questions and tapped me on the arm. And he said, "You're next," with a smile and a wink. And he finished that interview, came right over to me. And I thought, wow, that's a nice guy. Wanted to make sure that I knew I was going to be able to get him as well. And I think that was a very touching thing. And, there have been a lot of people that I've met, a lot of people. And, they're people.
They're people, right?
Just like you, Jim, just like me.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I'm very privileged to have had the opportunity.
Did you ever work with or have interactions with George Clooney's dad, Nick Clooney, who was on KNBC, Channel 4 in LA?
I watched him on TV, but I never met him. And his aunt, Rosemary Clooney, was another Clooney that was very famous, but I never met her as well. So it was just George Clooney. And years later, when he was performing on Broadway in Good Night, Good Luck, I was in New York and I went to go see that. And I had that memory in my mind and really enjoyed the show that much more because he was representing journalism. He was talking about Edward R. Murrow and playing the part of Murrow. And I remember in a news situation, him tapping me on the arm and saying, "You're next."
That's incredible. There really is, so many amazing stories as well. I know one thing that is near and dear to your heart, Hal, is wanting to let people know and really appreciate that the media might be getting an unfair bad rap right now in this current climate that we're in, but why there's nothing fake about the news. Tell us about that from your
Well, there is a chapter I called "There Is No Fake News." And, I had an interviewer the other day in Europe, and she asked me about fake news. And I said, "Well, do you think there's fake news?" I kind of turned it around on her. She said, "I think so." I said, "We see all the time here in Europe that, there are actors and actresses and people, celebrities that are being, hit with fake stories that aren't true." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Is that the mainstream media or is that the tabloids?" And she said, "Well, it's more the tabloids." And I think that's the point. If you're talking about mainstream media, people who are broadcast or print journalists or whatever, they've been trained. They've gone to school. They have learned in the school of hard knocks by getting on stories, and they are professionals. Now, I don't know of anybody in this business, and keep in mind, I'm very involved in my union. I have a camp for broadcasters. I have known almost every person to come through this town as far as journalists, and I don't know anybody that would make a fake story. I don't know anybody who wouldn't check for additional sources, like get two sources for some kind of a a piece of information to make sure it's accurate. I don't know anybody who would really just read a press release without making a phone call and checking on it. So to me, there's no fake news. But that doesn't mean there isn't fake news in some realms, like maybe social media coverage, that people make things up, but not in the business I'm in. I just, I don't know of any in that situation where they just make up stuff and put it on TV.
I want to let folks know too.
Let me ask you. I mean, do you know anybody like that?
No, not in the world of broadcast or print. No, I don't. I've seen, elements of it, like you say, in tabloids or on social media. I'll even see it in feeds where you'll see so-and-so has passed away. And that can't be the case because I just spoke to them 5 minutes ago and we had a tuna melt at the diner. So that's not real. But that's not coming from
right
the mainstream.
But if that is an honest mistake, that the sources that they had indicated that, it is incumbent on them to immediately get back on the air and create a correction. Right. And if they don't create a correction, they're leaving a false image out there that's wrong.
Exactly.
But we're all human. And that
right.
doesn't mean that there can't be an error. And that doesn't mean you might not say something wrong. I remember in radio, I was working in Houston, and San Antonio is in a county called Bexar County, but it's spelled Bexar, Bexar. Bexar is what it looks like, but Bear is what it sounds like. And it's like here, we have San Pedro, but some people might say San Pedro. So I, on the radio, did a story about something in San Antonio, read some wire copy, and I said Bexar County. The phones for hours, just off the hook. Why is this guy on the radio? He doesn't even know how to pronounce him. Well, you know what? It's an honest mistake. And everybody makes a mistake. But the question is, what do you do when you've made the mistake? Do you correct it? Do you make sure you don't make that kind of a mistake again?
Exactly.
But I just don't know of anybody who would make up some kind of a story and call it news.
No, definitely not news, right? You can see weird stuff on the internet and all where none of it's real, but that's not news. And for people to realize that there is a difference, like you say, is so incredibly important.
What I tell people is pick the outlets you trust.
Yes.
And in the outlets you trust, pick the journalists you trust. You could get one story, get 5 reporters on one story, and they all may tell it a little bit differently because they all have different brains.
Exactly.
You don't want carbon copy stories, but the facts still are the same. The video might be different because they got lucky and got some ring video.
Right.
Or, maybe there's a piece of information the other reporter didn't get that you got. But still, pick the people you trust.
Exactly. And people for all of these years and decades have trusted you, Hal Eisner, in so many ways, shapes, and forms. You received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Radio and Television News Association of Southern California, just one of the many accolades. And for those who maybe didn't see Hal do what he did so well, he really is a storyteller, a mentor, a survivor, resilient, but with a heart. And as he's talked about his civic, charitable ways, continue to this day. He's a true champion of things he believes in. And he's known for his calm demeanor, his compassion, that compassionate reporting style, which really makes such a huge difference, and community focused journalism, which also makes a tremendous difference as well. And he's received a multitude of journalism awards over the years, Emmys, Golden Globes, Golden Mics, that is, and working on the Golden Globe.
Don't think I'll get there.
And an Oscar and a Grammy. You never know. There's always a part 2 to one's career. But the Golden Mics, which are fantastic in the industry, the AP Awards, as well as honors from the Los Angeles Press Club, the Society of Professional Journalists, Associated Press, Among his AP honors, he received again that Lifetime Achievement Award, which is incredible, known as the Stark Chambers Award for Extraordinary Achievement, and the
There were
Lifetime
two of them. There was one from the AP, which was the Stan Chambers Award for Extraordinary Achievement, which at the time I was president of that organization.
The Stan Chambers, yeah.
And I named it. It was the AFTRA Lifetime Achievement Award. And while he was giving it out on one award ceremony, I walked up to the podium. We're all in tuxedos and everything. And I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, Stan, this is a guy who's been around forever, Stan Chambers, if you've never heard the name, and was beloved in this town. But I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, Stan, I hate to interrupt you while you're giving out an award, but I just want you to know that this award is being changed and it's being renamed. And it's now going to be called the Stan Chambers Award for Extraordinary Achievement after you.
How beautiful is that? Wow, that's incredible. Truly. I mean, the accolades are all there, but not why he's done what he's done. And nationally recognized mentoring program, Camp News, which is something really near and dear to his heart as well. Well, what are some things that you've done that sort of are the antithesis, the opposite of being in broadcast journalism, broadcast news, things that you've done that were able to balance out the craziness of being there on the scene, in the studio, on location, doing all the things that you've done over the years, bringing the news and the style that you have and doing it so fantastically. Did you like to go bowling on Monday nights? What is?
It's funny. I like seeing those pictures, by the way. Thank you. I really was all about the industry. I didn't go play golf, although my grandma gave me as a kid a birthday present of golf clubs, and they're sitting in the other room, but I haven't really used them. Maybe I will now in retirement, but I haven't really had those kind of hobbies that people tend to have over the years. I was more involved in industry-related things. So I was on the board of governors of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. That's me as a reporter in the 70s with all that hair and the beard.
Incredible, huh?
But, yeah, I wish.
Is that in Texas?
That was in Texas, right?
Yeah.
That's the United Press International wire machine right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been involved in organizations. That's me at 16, by the way. In that station I told you about, there was the power of the light bulb. That was the first gig right there when I was 16 years old. But I was involved with it. Oh, that's me as a kid.
Yeah,
you think I was kind of knowing what I was going to be when I grew up?
He was pointing to the.
But I always was involved in organizations related to what I was doing for a living. So I was involved in organizations like the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences on the board of governors, and also a vice chair of the board. This is the organization that gives out the Primetime Emmys. I was executive producer of the local Emmys. I was in the president of the Associated Press Television Radio Association. I'm now on the national board of SAG-AFTRA, our union. And of course, now I'm working on trying to share the book. So I think, my hobbies have always been related to my love, which has been broadcasting, my first love being radio, and then graduating to television.
Did you have a preference? Some people love being out there and covering the story and being, in the thick of where it all is. And then there's others who really love the studio work. Did you love both, or were you a reporter's reporter? How do you look at it?
I love both. I mean, I have to remind you of what my father said, which was do the best of what you do best. Exactly. And what I did best was reporting on the scene, on the streets, thousands of stories. And so that was my true love. But for 8 years, I got to do a Sunday show, a public affairs show called Fox 11 News in Depth. And I love that. Once a week, I got to go in the studio. I got to sit at the anchor desk, work with some wonderful, wonderful people in the studio who were everything from stage manager to, lighting and audio and everything else. And, it was like a nice break once a week to be able to go in and do that show. So I had the best of both worlds. I got to be on the street. I got to be in the studio. And what more can you ask for?
Exactly right, my friend. How long did it take to write the book when you first put those first words on paper, and then when you had the last period at the end of the very last sentence and you were comfortable enough to say, okay, maybe a couple of quick rewrites, but I'm good. Now it can go out to the world. What was that process like for you?
I think we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of about 6-7 years. It's a tough process. I was very, very fortunate to have a team of people that I worked with on this. An artist that made that cover, somebody who helped collaborate with me on how I wanted to frame certain things. I had a technical guy who I think is wonderful, Jamie Knapp. And if you go to haleisner.com, there it is right there. haleisner.com came about in the year 2000, 4 years before Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook. I could have been a visionary.
You were ahead of the game.
And
Hal always gets the scoop.
And they call me Scoop Hal, right?
Yeah.
We took that haleisner.com that's on the screen right there and converted it to a book companion. And so there are little printed articles on there, but there's also 6 interviews on video that I was interviewed by Elsa Ramon, who has been an anchor here in Los Angeles on a couple of different stations and also on a news radio station here. And she read the book, and then she drilled me on a lot of different questions. And we put that up in episodes, sort of 6 episodes that are on haleisner.com right now. But, I think that I'm trying to remember the original question because I diverted. But it's been quite an interesting process.
The process,
people helping me.
Like, yeah. And how did you know?
Process.
How you knew you were comfortable enough to keep that last period on the last sentence and then release it to the world? When did you know? You know what? It's done. I'm comfortable. It's done. Now the world can enjoy it.
I want to say a couple of months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago. And at that point, we got a wonderful, it's self-published really, but there's a wonderful publishing company in the Carolinas called Palmetto Publishing. And I hired them, and they really were also part of Team Hal, and they helped me. Now, the cover was painted by an artist, Liat Silvera, and it's hand painted. This cover is hand painted. I thought that I'd seen a lot of books from broadcasters, and they all had the camera, the microphone, and the reporter standing out there. And I thought, I don't want to badmouth it, but a little trite for me. And I thought, what can I do to be a little more creative? And so I talked to Liat, and we tried inks, and we tried black and white, and we tried grays, and we came up finally with this painting I think she did a beautiful job with. And actually, she's going to give me that painting now that I paid for it. And I'm going to hang it up here on the wall and, hand that off to the kids. So
that's so beautiful. And it really is a fantastic cover. I mean, really, absolutely is. It really captures you in a certain essence. Yeah.
And interestingly, that right there, you notice the microphone I got headsets on. Mm-hmm. Well, what is that? That's not radio. That's TV. It's a podcast studio. And right. I had a podcast for 8 years. I may bring it back, called What the Hal.
That's right. You did. That's right. Yeah. That's perfect.
And that's what that scene is, me in the podcast studio.
Very inspiring. And like when I had the opportunity to welcome you to our show as a fellow broadcast guy, television, film, radio, whatever the case may be, I said, I got to talk to Hal, not only to tell his story and allow him to share his wit and wisdom, because he's beloved not only in Los Angeles, California, which is the second largest market in the world. It is all of his years put in, and the way that he conducted himself, and the way that he delivered the news, the way that he had opportunities to really tell stories that impact people's lives and get people to think and stop and laugh and cry and feel, and in a human way, really touching into the depths of humanity. And that's why he's beloved, and that's why this book is there, because it's something that he needed. He's told so many stories. He had to tell in his words, in his way. And we are the ones that benefit from that. And those who want to go into the career benefit from it as well. And really amazing, my friend. Congratulations, kudos, bravo, job well done. Not easy. A lot of hours, a lot of holidays, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of, sorry, I can't go to the family barbecue. I got to go with the news crew. There's something breaking. A lot of sacrifice, but everything well earned. And I know is a real blessing. And you've had the love and support of those who understand it, get it, and care, and root you on. So that way you can have this illustrious and lengthy career in the industry. So I tip my hat from here in New York and the East Coast to you, sir, as a broadcaster and somebody that inspires us all.
Thank you. I mean, it's a tough business. It challenges. I know we would always have Thanksgiving dinner on the Saturday after Thanksgiving because I had to work. But it's like it's a rewarding business. It's a wonderful career. I highly recommend it. And if I had it to do all over again, I'd do it the same way. I mean, things really were nice, and I'm very happy about it. This, by the way, if anybody is really interested, is available at Amazon.com and also at BarnesandNoble.com, if I can put a little plug in there. And, if you get it and you'd like me to sign it, let me know. You can contact me through DMs on social media. It's my name, Hal Eisner, on every one of the platforms, and be glad to send you a little book plate to stick on the inside of the book. But, this has been a very nice interview, and I can't thank you enough for inviting me and taking the time to have a conversation, because, I particularly appreciate this because you're also in the same lane. And so it means a lot.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, my friend. And that's what I consider them, conversations versus this a typical interview, because I think people really get a lot more out of a good conversation. This was unscripted. This was free flowing. There were no pre-prepared questions. It was two guys talking about, the old school way of doing things, the new school way of doing things, talking shop, but also talking about life and what it means, and sharing your incredible story in such a way that I think hopefully people will enjoy and watch over and over. The book, again, folks, as the fine gentleman said, is available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. At some point, it'll also be in the bookstores for you as well. But truly, with Hal, it's been film at 11 and bulletins at once.
You're right. Back to you in the studio.
Yeah, now back to the studio. Bob, what's the latest forecast?
Yeah.
Truly, it's been a delight and honor, my friend, and a new friend made here for sure. And I really hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I absolutely have with you, Hal.
Absolutely. And again, thank you very much. And to all of you out there, good to talk with you. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us.
Congratulations on everything, fine sir. We will see you again soon, I don't doubt. And we'll continue to spread the word about the book, spread the word about our show. We would love that. And there it is, my friends, An Accidental Career, and beautifully written by the man himself, the legend, Hal Eisner here on the Jim Masters Show. You be well, my friend. You take care. Come see us again. And again, continued blessings to you and to your family. Before we go, did any others in the family, the kids, what have you, go into the industry too?
Nope.
Just you.
Just to put a bullet point on that, my dad was in ladies' lingerie. He was a salesman. He worked for a company called Dina Lingerie, and he would go into the stores and tell to the buyers, and then customers would buy from them. And Dad once offered me, a little territory if I wanted to, get into that business, and I didn't want to. I had no interest in it. In fact, when my friends would ask me, "What does my dad do?" I'd say he's in ladies' underwear, and it was a fun thing I like to play with, but I never, I never really had an interest. And my kids really don't have the interest either. I mean, my son was somebody who played video games in school, couldn't get him away from the computer. Now he's a software engineer making video games. And I've got 2 girls, and they're doing great. And I've got a grandson and another one on the way. So life's good. And I'm a happy camper. And I'm so happy to have spent some time with you, Jim, and gotten to know you. And I'd be glad to come back sometime and visit again.
We always say the porch light is always on for our guests, and it is on for you. And again, a real pleasure chatting with you. And I just got to tell you again what you said off air. God, you look a lot like Spencer Tracy.
I just saw Judgment in Nuremberg, which is a Spencer Tracy movie I watched here on television. So streaming. But thank you for that. I'll take it as a compliment.
Take that and run with it. Put it in the bank, my friend. Thanks once again, Hal. You be well, and congratulations on everything.
All the best.
Thank you very much. We'll chat soon. Bye-bye now. Hal Eisner, the legend, coming to us from Los Angeles, California. What an extraordinary conversation with the legendary multi-award-winning broadcast news journalist from television and radio, and decades on Los Angeles television and on KTTV, Fox 11, and other stations, KCOP, Channel 13. There was an announcer that used to be on in the 80s, I think, in the early 90s. And he used to do the station ID for KCOP. And I used to love the way he did it. I forgot the guy's name because, again, I used to love the announcers too. And he would say, "You're watching KCOP, Channel 13, Los Angeles." He would really emphasize the Los Angeles. There was another guy who was an announcer on Channel 17 in Philadelphia, WPHL-TV 17. Before they started calling it Philly 17. And he used to go, "This is WPHL Channel 17, Philadelphia." He would take the Philadelphia and just sort of make it melodic. Philadelphia. Used to love that. Back in the day, right back in the day. A true gentleman, a scholar, a mentor, an expert, and a really cool guy, a class act, right? And for those of you who are in Los Angeles, because we do have an international audience, we have a lot of viewers that follow us from, here in New York and New England and the Northeast tri-state area, but also, West Coast, North, South, East, West, Canada, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. These are cool pictures of Hal doing his thing over the years. We welcome all of you, but for those of you in the LA area who still have a tear in your eye for Hal not being on your screen necessarily, though he has been for all these years, get the book. You will absolutely love it. And, he's around. Hal's around. He'll always be around. It's one of the good guys, folks. And check that out. It's, again, at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. At the time of this broadcast. Soon it will be in the bookstores, so look for it there. And a real honor and a privilege and a pleasure to welcome Hal Eisner to the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series. Drop your comments below, folks. If you enjoyed this episode, well, we would love it if you give this episode a thumbs up like. There's a little thumbs up icon on our YouTube channel there. Subscribe to Jim Masters TV. There's well over 1,600 episodes of our series with celebrity friends and special guests who stop by. You can see them all archived, including this episode. If you joined us late, this will be archived as well. Share this episode on your social media platforms. directly from our YouTube channel. And drop a comment below. What memories do you have that you'd like to share? Did you enjoy our conversation? Did you learn something? Did you grow up watching Hal on television? Maybe you knew him on radio, whatever the case may be. Share your stories as well. For all of us here, Jim Masters thanking you for your time this time. Till next time. And come see us again. Keep the porch light open and on for you. Don't forget, as we always say, to love one another, take care of one another, and don't forget to do the very same for yourself. It's important to do that for yourself as well. Thanks for stopping by. It's always an honor and pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned. Another great episode of the Jim Masters Show series comes up in just a moment. Till then, for all of us, have a great day. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being here. Be well and see us again soon right here on the Jim Masters Show. Cheers, everybody.